this segment is about knife skills. So today we're going to talk about using knives with the kids. So this was also probably another activity that some parents might be more anxious about their kids participating in. And so this is where the reassurance that when kids have the opportunity to practice a new skill and that they have the time, that they can really excel at something. They're going to be really slow at actually doing the activity at first, but that's where the patience and the calm guidance comes in, because sometimes when parents are really anxious and they're telling the kids, oh no, don't do that, then it also kind of passes on to the child and they might be less interested in participating in the activity or just wanting their grown-up to do it for them. So that's one thing to really tell parents. And again, just to reiterate that this is why these sessions are so great, is because we give that time for the parents and the child to really participate in the activity together, and to have that time for the parents to show some guidance to the child. Whereas if they're home, then they're making dinner, they're less likely to have that time, because most of the time, as with myself, I'm pretty rushed to cook dinner and put it on the table. I'd be very not uninterested in having my child learn how to cut something while I'm trying to make dinner. So that's why we want to use these sessions for kids to practice and then bring it home with them. So first things first is, along with the group expectations and the kitchen and food safety rules that you go through at the beginning of each session, it's really important that you do that so that kids know that it's serious business when we're preparing food, because you could really get hurt, or you can really get sick if your hands are not clean, or if you use the knife in a way that might be harmful to yourself or to other people, or even if you're using a grater and you can cut yourself, right? So we really want to prevent that, especially in our sessions. And so the thing that you add is about knife safety. So really important that you talk about this before you even actually give a knife to a child and a cutting board to a child, because once you give it to them, they're just really concentrated on touching it and waving it around, which is something we don't want them to do, and they won't be listening to you at all. So the first thing we want to highlight is that is the knife placement. So when we're not using the knives, we want to make sure that the knife blade faces away from them. So we place it on top of the head of the cutting board, in front of the cutting board, and we want the blade to face away from us. Okay, and when we have our knives, we don't wave it around and we don't point it at anyone. And it's up to you, but typically I have a pretty short leash on when they can use the knife. So if they're waving it around or really pointing it to another child, we might actually even take it away or just have the parent do the cutting. Just because we really just want to minimize any harm to anybody in the session. And then if we happen to be walking around with the knife, so for example, in our sessions, once I went through the rules of using the knife, I would have a child take turns coming forward to get a knife and then walk back so that they can actually practice the rules themselves. So when we're walking away with the knife, so for example, if you're going to hand it to them, we hand it to them with the blade, and then they'll walk with it on their side. So it would be almost like touching the outside of their thighs when they're walking, so it's not pointing at anybody and also not at themselves. All right, so those are the knife safety rules that we want to go through with the kids and the parents, and also have the parents make sure that the kids follow it. And these are practices that they will also bring back home if not already. Okay, so what I would suggest, the first thing that we do is with your cutting board, make sure it's a sturdy placement. So one of the ways that you can do that is to have a wet paper towel and put it underneath the cutting board. Or for me, in my kitchen, just so that I'm not always getting paper towels wet, I just use this shelf liner. It's a little bit of that rubbery material type shelf liner, and I just use it as just my cutting board placement. And then you just put it on top, and then this cutting board shouldn't move. And that's important for also safety wise, because you don't want to be cutting and then slipping and then it cuts your fingers. All right. So if parents are interested in having their kids practice the knife skills at home, or even if they've got the hang of it and the child just really wants to be involved in the cooking, just start with small foods. If the parents are extra cautious, just start with soft foods. So for example, the recipe for the wraps would be using tofu. Tofu is soft enough. We would instruct the child to hold it closer to the blade, so kind of like this. And instead of like this, my child used to hold it like this, but there's no strength when you hold it so far off. So we want to hold it closer to the blade like this. And so that gives you a firmer grip. And then with your other hand, we always teach the kids the bear claw. This ensures that your fingertips are safe because you're less likely to cut yourself. It kind of stops you. Your knuckles will kind of get in the way, so you're less likely to cut any part of your hands or fingers. And the important thing that you need to remind parents and kids is you need to tuck your thumb. So the bear claw looks like this, but don't leave your thumb hanging out. We also want to give your thumb some shelter, so tuck it behind your fingers. And we'll cut it down like this. So this back and forth motion, or if some kids want to do this, and that's fine, just make sure that this cutting board again is sturdy and the food itself is sturdy. So maybe the parent just holds the food for them. So you can do it like this, or you can do this back and forth motion and it's nice and soft. Okay, so for this wrap recipe, if you have the time, I really suggest that you maybe season the tofu first, and if you have the means, I would pan fry it if possible. So for our sessions, we put salt, pepper, and a little drizzle and a few drops of soy sauce on each side, and we just pan fried it so that it's a little bit crispy. And I found that for parents that have never had tofu or just had a bad experience, they really liked this way of eating tofu. And that's also one thing to stress. Another way to stress of the ways that we flavor foods can make the actual ingredient taste different. So something that's with soy sauce is going to taste very different from something that has used like curry seasoning, for example. Okay, so there's no actual way to, cut these. You can cut it however small or big you want them. For the wraps, I would encourage you to cut them sort of like this, little strips like this, so that when you place it in the rice paper, you can roll it easily. Other soft foods that that kids can try to cut at home or during the session, if you want them to practice, is some tomatoes. So tomatoes are pretty soft, but they're quite watery, so it's up to you. The other kinds of foods are bananas, or even like Bartlett pears. Like when Bartlett pears are ripe, they're very soft and easy to cut. And then you can slowly progress to slightly harder textures. So for example, like strawberries, kids like to cut maybe like the vegetable, like the leaf portion of the strawberries off and then cut them in half. And then also part of the wrap recipe is bell peppers. So bell peppers are also a good texture to cut. And so they'll just sort of get the hang of it eventually, right? And so we'll cut this pepper like this. So maybe the parents might have to cut it in half for them. And so once you cut into fours, you can actually just rip it off like this. And then the seeds can just go on the side here. It's usually a little less messy when we do it this way, so it just comes out as a whole. Okay, and then we'll just have the kids to cut it into what looks like strips as much as possible. It might be all over the place, but the shape of it is not important. As long as they've succeeded in the cutting process, then that's great. So we'll cut them into strips like this. Okay. Maybe a little bit thinner. All right, so then you can do that with the rest of the peppers. And so this recipe is actually great for the whole table to cook together, just because you'll be cutting a few vegetables, and it's pretty tough for one family to actually eat a whole pepper. Or you can just portion it off per group within the table, and they can just cook on themselves. But I find like social engagement really happens when the table cooks all together. parents or grown-ups, like they talk to each other. Sometimes they share stories that they have in common with their children, maybe troubles with eating and different things like that. And the kids then also see that other kids are interested, and so when they see other kids interested, they're also more likely to participate. And yeah, those are just good opportunities for socializing. Okay, so now that we have our ingredients ready to go, I'm going to show you how to do the wrapping for the rice paper in case you haven't done it before. So this is what the rice paper looks like. It might look a bit different for different brands, but essentially they're mostly in circular packaging. You can find them in most grocery stores nowadays, usually in the Asian foods aisle, or other Chinese Asian grocery stores like T&T or something. But this is what it looks like when it's dry. If you've ever had Vietnamese rolls, salad rolls, they're usually probably transparent, but when they're not rolled up yet or cooked yet, this is what it looks like. So what we do is we'll have parents or kids wet the paper. So you can just do it in a circle, just make sure that the whole paper is wet. So sometimes you can either have maybe like a dish that is about this high with water that fits, and you can just put the whole thing in, or just have a bowl like this and just roll the rice paper. So the rice paper will take some time to get soft and malleable, but this is a really great way to just put it onto the surface that they're going to be wrapping the salad rolls in. So I'll move these peppers to one side here. So it'll soften as you're preparing it. So that's one thing to tell parents, is that it doesn't go super soft right away. And then just have them or the kids just assemble all the ingredients and just put it in just like so. I usually slide it sort of near the bottom and give it almost like an inch of space. Yeah. And so there's going to be lots of different vegetables that you'll be using, or maybe just one or two, it's up to you. But essentially the way that you wrap it is like the way that you wrap a burrito. So first I just wrap the bottom parts first. So wrap it all together like this. Sorry. Okay, so we're going to wrap it around like so, and then just fold in the sides just to make sure the food inside is sealed. And then we'll just keep rolling and rolling and rolling, and then you have a salad roll. They don't have to look perfect. The key thing is really just that the kids are able to accomplish the task, and that's it. And so then they can dip it in any sauce they want, or maybe they don't want a sauce, but it's up to you. So this is a little bit of a nutrition tidbit. So for some recipes, we'll be using a variety of vegetables, and that's a good message to communicate to kids and their grown-ups, just because the more colors that you have on your plate, the more nutrition that you'll be getting. So as you can see here, we have some different colored vegetables here. Different colored vegetables provide different nutrients. So for example, vegetables that are red or orange, kind of like these bell peppers and the tomato, or yellow even, they provide some really good nutrients that maybe green vegetables or dark green leafy vegetables don't have. So for example, these different colored red, yellow, orange vegetables are a good source of vitamin A, which is really good for our eyes and helps us see and do really good things for our vision. And for example, the dark green leafy vegetables like this kale are really good sources of vitamin E, vitamin K, even a little bit of calcium and a little bit of iron. Dark green leafy vegetables are known for as a good plant-based source of iron. They're not as good or easily absorbable as it is from meat, but a little bit of cooked green leafy vegetables gives you a pretty good source of iron. So whether you bake it, you boil it, you steam it, you saute it, they're a really good source of iron like that.